Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all here with us this afternoon here in Brazil, and evening in Kenya, and afternoon, evening in South Africa. So my name is Cristine Severo. I'm going to mediate this conference. This is the, oops, sorry. Have you all here with us this afternoon here in Brazil. Sorry. This is the annual conference of the International Association for the Integrational Study of Language and Communication. Today we have the presentation of Dr. Sibusiso. His research interests are in language and communication. His current work is on exploring sociolinguistic concepts such as language alternation, monolingualism, and multilingualism technology with the view to influence language teaching and learning in online education and broadly, young people's identities and aspirations in the global south. We have also Irene Kimani. She's a PhD student whose current study is in the field of forensic linguistics with particular focus on the language of the law in relation to justice for litigants. Her other research interests are in the areas of language in education, technology, and decolonization of knowledge. The title of their joint talk today is Language and Communication, Challenges when Learning Science in Lower Primary School, using Lego to develop multiple ways of communicating. Dr. Cliff and Irene, thank you very much for your virtual presence here today with us. Welcome, and please, the floor now is yours.
Oh, thank you very much, Christine, for the opportunity to present at this forum. I'm pleased to be here. So I begin my presentation by introducing Lego as a relatively new and contemporary game in Kenya, where this study was situated, and is actually becoming very popular among urban populations, especially the young children. So it's a game that has been played all over the world, and which is produced by the Lego Group, who are one of the biggest manufacturers of play materials. The Lego Group was founded in 1932 by Ole Kirk Christiansen, based on what we refer to as the Lego brick. So according to the Lego Foundation, really they're really focusing on education and learning, and they have a wing or a branch that is referred to as Lego Education, complete with a manifesto, which indicates that learning is at the core of the Lego Group's values. So they are really committed to education, educating children of the world. Now, Lego products are available in the market, and they have been classified and can be used by children all the way from preschool, even playgroup, even early years, all the way up to university, because they provide learning opportunities for all children. So this is a game that is not limited to children only, but it goes all the way up to university. As we all know, children are really very playful and very creative during play. And during play, children are always using their mother tongues or their L1 to communicate. And of course, because Lego is just a game like any other game, this is not different when it comes to the use of Lego blocks. So children during play, during Lego, they'll be speaking. Most of the time, they'll be using their L1, which is their mother tongue. In this case, for this study, it was Kiswahili. Now, we see educators all over the world recommending the use of Lego blocks across the curriculum to make sure that learners are more engaged, learners are more, they're doing something useful, they're motivated, and of course, to make learning more effective. This is a game that is taken really, very seriously. We see universities such as Northwestern University in South Africa using or combining play and language education in the Faculty of Education of Afrikaans. So they have really taken this seriously as a game. So it's not only a game, but it's rather an educational game. So from the 2000s going forward, Lego has brought in a new concept into the game, and is now using robotics and electronic technology to make toys that are programmable and to enter into education fully. So the main purpose of this curriculum that they have created, and the main purpose of bringing robotics and electronic technology into play, is to make sure that there is more learning taking place, or there is learning taking place. It is really very deliberate and strategic, a strategic move by the LEGO group. So robotics, coding and programming, of course, we all know, are considered very crucial and valuable in this century. And as the world enters into the fourth industrial revolution, this could not have come at a better time. So the LEGO group deciding to come up with games that are programmable is really a step in the right direction. LEGO uses a concept of interlocking blocks. And this is not something new. As we have seen, this started all the way in 1932. It has been used over the years by children, but there is something new about it. Apart from the block may not be new, but there are new concepts here, because there is programming concepts, there are vocabularies, new vocabularies that are used in the game, and these are really very new to young children. Of course, that makes, as we argue in this study, that presents children with a major language learning task. So that is really at the core of this study. So we're looking at the tube and stud mechanism, which is the mechanism, the basic mechanism that is used in LEGO. So we see the stud fitting into the tube, as you can see on the right hand. That is really the basic LEGO as we know it. But like I've said earlier, that the LEGO group has introduced programming and electronic technology to make programmable toys. So they've improved from the basic and gone on to bringing new aspects of learning. So we go on to look at the LEGO education curriculum. So this comes complete with the curriculum. So the LEGO education curriculum has projects, they have programmed, or they have organized some projects which are anchored on the habits of mind. The habits of mind, as we know them, are defined as having the predisposition towards engaging in intelligent behavior, especially when handling tasks, when handling problems and different phenomena. And of course, this is something really important when it is inculcated into young minds. So these habits of mind really do not occur in isolation, but rather they occur in clusters. So in a regular education class, in a regular LEGO class, you see different children, doing different things and learning different habits, and of course, displaying different types of experiences. So these are experiences that are very key for any education system that aims to produce, inventors, innovators, in the future. And this is actually very timely for Kenya, because it is in line with the Kenya's new competency-based curriculum. So just so you may know, just in 2017, Kenya launched a new curriculum, which we are referring to as CBC. So this is really timely. For purposes of this study, the participants in this study used the WeDo 2.0 curriculum, which is actually meant for primary school use. And as you can see on our topic, that we targeted the lower primary school. So this WeDo 2.0 curriculum was actually the right curriculum to use for the study. So this is just a tabular presentation of the system, the habits of mind, which are systems thinking, creativity, optimism, collaboration, communication, and ethical considerations. If you look at this, they are closely related to the 21st century skills, and also the 4IR skills. So these habits of mind are anchored into the LEGO curriculum, and of course also anchored, some of them also anchored into the CBC curriculum that Kenya launched in 2017. I go on to look at the LEGO educational resources for this particular study. The curriculum that we use, which I've said is the LEGO WeDo 2.0, is a curriculum that comes with an educational set, It also comes with complete with lesson plans. It comes complete with, with curriculum material. And when it comes to curriculum material, I'm speaking about a step-by-step illustration of how to do various things or various projects. So it really is very comprehensive. We are also seeing them, we also have assessment tools. It also comes with teacher training support if and when required by the LEGO education group. The WIDO 2.0, like I've said earlier, is specifically for primary school learners, and this is the one that we used for learners in this that's why in this study. So the WIDO 2.0 provides learners with an opportunity to create and to come up with as many new things as possible, but using the same items, or create themes and constantly discover by investing in by looking at what they have been provided, but coming up with their own individual creations. So just a sneak preview on the electronic parts, the key electronic parts used in the LEGO WIDO 2.0. Remember, we have said that the LEGO group has invested or tried to bring in the programming aspect and using electronic technology. And these are the key parts that are used in LEGO WIDO 2.0. So I go on to share with you a typical classroom, a typical LEGO classroom. You're looking at one of the projects that the students were able to come up with. This is just one of the interactive sessions. And in this particular project, they were actually making a crane, as you can see. They were making a crane. And of course, doing some programming on the side. You can see they have a laptop there. And eventually the crane is supposed to move as a regular crane would. I also happened to be a mentor in this particular group. So I had the experience of sharing with the children. I also had the experience of guiding them because the mentor or the teacher in the LEGO classroom is basically just a guide. They're not supposed to be there to tell them what to do, but you're there as a guide. And of course, the education materials tell you, how to move from step A to B. So you're just guiding the learners, and it's a really, really exciting experience. It was an exciting experience, at least for me, and also for the children in this particular study. Some of the completed projects, or the projects we were able to complete with the children, like we've seen the crane, we also had there's a fan, there's a science rover, a glowing snail, a spy robot, and many others. But these are just some of the projects that they were able to complete. So this then brings us to the statement of the problem. Having looked at the background of LEGO, having looked at what the children were able to accomplish and what the LEGO education curriculum envisages, then we can now look at the statement of the problem. As we have seen, LEGO is a really exciting game, but it is programmed in the English language, which therefore poses a challenge to urban children who are ages 6 to 9, majority of whom acquire Kiswahili as their L1. And English in Kenya is a taught language. And of course, learners at this age, especially in our setting here, have not yet gained proficiency in the English language. Children between this age, of course, are also too young to, learn a skill using a new language or using a second language, because English in this case is their L2. Of course, furthermore, they can hardly absorb, another subject, let alone, learn the language itself. Having to learn another subject or a new subject or gain skills in a different discipline becomes quite difficult for them. Furthermore, there are no available versions of LEGO in any African language. Of course, therefore, this is a major disadvantage, despite the fact that children want to play this game. It is a disadvantage because in this region, in Africa, we are at a time where we are attempting to catch up with the rest of the world in as far as robotics, in coding, programming, and even the focus skills in the 4IR are concerned. But really, this becomes a disadvantage to the children in Africa. Therefore, as we can see, language and communication, therefore, are key challenges, hence the rationale of this study. I now take you to the study objectives for this particular study. We were looking at we aimed at exploring the use of Kiswahili and English in LEGO gaming. and robotics instruction in children aged between 6 to 9 years in Nakuru Town, Kenya. The second objective was to describe the language and communication challenges in coding and programming skills in children aged 6 to 9 years in Nakuru Town, Kenya. So those were the study objectives that we focused on in this study. So the findings of this study will be very useful, are very useful to linguists, to policymakers, those who come up with policies, and this particularly goes to, those making policies in Africa, curriculum developers, educationists like myself and others, robotics experts, because they would really need to know, what are children able to do? Gaming corporations like Lego and maybe other corporations that are, involved in coming up with games, and the general public, who are the consumers, not only in Kenya, but also in Africa. So that brings me to the end of my first part of the presentation. I now wish to invite my co-presenter and mentor, Dr. Keith.
Okay. Good evening. I hope you can all get a sense of what I'm sharing on my screen. Yes. So basically, I want to take over from my colleague that we looked at the policies of in education, of language education in Kenya, South Africa, and in South Africa, Kenya, and Ethiopia as well. So in terms of South Africa, or maybe let me start with Kenya. So the language policy of Kenya provides that the language of instruction in lower primary is mother tongue in rural areas, while places, while in, okay, why, I'm just getting rid of it. Okay, while places that are linguistically heterogeneous, such as urban and peri-urban areas, are directed to use Kiswahili as the language of instruction. English is a taught subject in the curriculum, and children aged 6 to 9 have not acquired a proficiency in the language, therefore necessitating some code switching or multilingualism, or that we're going to look at when we go into the data and into discussion of the findings. And then, of course, the target here is that they're still learning the L2. Thus, the use of both Kiswahili and English is necessary for students to learn these this programming or coding and robotics under the STEM-related subjects. If I look at one other example of another policy in Kenya, the language policy in the medium of education, the federal policy calls for use of the mother tongue as medium of instruction from grade 1 to 8. It calls for teacher training to be in the MOI of primary school. However, Hugh et al. Note that at that point, only the Oromia region and the Afan Oromo streams in Amhara region have completely consistent with the policy. So meaning here that you've got more years of doing the L1, starting from grade 1 to grade 8. And of course, you also have an added advantage of teachers who are trained in the L1. That's why we thought we should quote this example. Then in South Africa, it is the duty of each and every school governing body to formulate a language policy document aligned to the language and education policy, which gives the legal framework for language policy at schools. The LEAP became effective in 1997 and aims to foster multilingualism and use of former disadvantaged languages at South African schools. But actually what we've also picked up is that the issue here is that English is still dominant, and then of course, and the fact that the multilingualism that is aspired is not always there, and that the school governing body itself may not necessarily have the capacity and the knowledge of how to implement the language in education policy. So LEGO and the language interface in terms of literature that we're situating this study under is the fact that basically language and science. Where does language fit in the learning of science? How should it be taught and who should be teaching it? Many schools in the USA, for example, keep English language separate from the STEMs, but here we have got a situation where we're trying to promote teamwork, promote communication skills, negotiation skills, and analytical skills and STEM concepts all within the same classroom. And then the learning of science for vocabulary as well is also happening at the same time. Just like we've mentioned some other study done at the University of the Northwest that the Lego game can actually promote the learning of all 4 skills like reading, writing, speaking, and listening in classrooms. Then language and play. Play is also very important, and it's often undervalued by most teachers. Whereas play is not wasteful, but actually it's part of productive learning. Research in L1 has shown the prevalence of language play in both the language data available to the learner and the learner production, and there are numerous studies on that. And language play is potentially of great benefit to the linguistic development of second language learners in terms of studies that have been done who are in favor of the model of integrating what somebody calls, we need to take non-serious language more seriously in relation to language and play. Then in the L1, which we are looking at, according to Njindila 2018, a lot of research done in Africa suggests that academic achievement in Africa is made difficult by the fact that learners are deprived of learning through their mother tongues. Similarly, these people observe that African languages have been relegated and rendered non-functional in the context of power and and life management. The scholars here, of course, encourage that there should be use of African languages, and that indeed the science and maths itself should be taught in the African languages. Therefore, the use of L1 has the potential of making children improve, such as critical thinking and also other literacy skills. We also look at code switching and code alternation as some of the things that have been used by teachers. Classroom code switching is defined as the alternate use of more than one language code by any classroom participant. Bliss and Low 2008 explained that learners in multilingual situations switch codes to accommodate. So the learners themselves do switch among languages in some classrooms in Africa. And thus, in order to build quality STEM experiences for children, language is considered important as it offers communication opportunities and allow for complex reasoning and gives on hands-on practical examples in the context of where the language is used and where development can happen. TransLanguaging as well has been proposed, particularly in some primary schools around South Africa. Williams 2020 says that TransLanguaging in science includes the use of semiotic repertoires complete with non-linguistic models of meaning, e.g. gestures that until recently have gone unnoticed in research into content language integrated learning. So some of these multimodal, multisemiotic means often get left out when in these science classrooms. Instead, there's this tendency to look at only just the L1 and the L2. So even when looking at the design of this study, multimodal transcriptions made from video recordings of lessons allow a cross-case analysis of the emergent bilingual shifts from oral to gestural or tactile modes during a biology and physics unit. One teacher in the Eastern Cape demonstrated a skilled bridging discourse across modes, discourses, and languages to provide learners with what appeared to be improved opportunities to learn science as opposed to the usual brief and reactive code switching and avoidance of home languages, what Probin calls pedagogic translanguaging. And then game research in multilingual classroom as well raises interesting question in terms of what training do the instructors need Should it cover game theory, multilingual communication, and STEM? As I've mentioned, that Probin decries the fact that there is little training that guides teachers towards a coherent, systematic approach to using both languages in classroom, where it's designed to enhance opportunities to learn. And of course, there are some critical views on this of linking the L1 to quality education and also to testing when you want to find out the educational attainments of the learners. So, and now taking it to the integrational linguistics perspective, to make sense of any episode of human communication, we have to recognize an integration of activities being carried out by particular individuals in a particular set of circumstances. Signs are created in the course of this integrational process. For integrationists, a sign is not a sign until it is contextualized. The act of contextualization and the establishment of the sign are one and the same. Some of the social, cultural, and contextual factors of language learning and use cannot be accounted by the rules, even when the attempt is to draw on sociolinguistics and anthropological methods. Participation and dispositions during the game become essential, and the interactions between instructors and the learner. And then the question we ask is, how do we deal with the teaching and learning? That is where language becomes decontextualized. I'll now hand over to Irene to take us through the findings of the study.
Thank you, Dr. Cliff. Before we go to the findings, probably just to look briefly into the methodology that we used for this study. Our research design was descriptive survey design. The location of the study was Nakuru Town, Kenya. This was a small-scale pilot study that was conducted after a 12-week program where Lego is introduced to 12 learners aged between 6 and 9. Of course, the target population was the 12 learners that were participating in the Miles of Great Hopes Lego program. They were 6 to 9 years old, and together with their 3 mentors and teachers. So therefore, our sample size is 3 mentors and 12 learners. The sampling procedure, therefore, was census sampling because we used all the participants in that particular program. The data collection methods, mainly we used focus group discussions and participant observations for both our respondents, our different groups of respondents. And our data analysis and presentation, we used integrational and thematic analysis, as you will see when we present our findings. So our findings, we go straight into our findings. The use of Kiswahili and English in Lego gaming and robotics instruction. This was one of our themes. When it came to the learners, the mentors did not use, the learners reported that mentors did not actually use English throughout, but kept switching to Kiswahili most of the time, therefore evidencing code switching. Some of the Kiswahili words they said were also quite complex, despite Kiswahili being their L1. Meaning there was the complexity came in there because probably of they were scientific terms. The learners also reported that they were better able to comprehend new subject matter when interpreted into Kiswahili in their L1. They were also better able to express themselves using Kiswahili and communicate among themselves and with their mentors too. When it came to the mentors on the same theme, the mentors reportedly said that they used code switching in the Lego classroom as it was helpful in explaining this difficult concept and also helpful in teaching and learning of new vocabulary in both languages. As we have seen that the learners had actually said that in some of the Kiswahili words were complex. So it means the complexity was not only in English, but also in the L1. Learners are also, according to the mentors, the learners are more at ease when using Kiswahili during play. They also affirm that there is definitely a link between the experience that children have, from their backgrounds and the concepts that they learned in class. So it was, however, difficult sometimes to get relevant examples for some of the concepts that the learners or the teachers wanted the learners to really understand. Overall, the mentors' attitude towards the use of L1 in Lego instruction was positive, and of course yielded favorable learning outcomes. As you have seen, we were able to complete some projects, so definitely there were favorable learning outcomes. When it comes to language and communication challenges in learning coding and programming skills, learners reported that they were not fully competent in their L2. Therefore, understanding some of the concepts in the L2 was quite difficult. They also said that they had, of course, because there was also the participant observation was one of the methods we were using to collect data. We were able to observe that children had self-expression issues in L2. Therefore, well, the children did not know the technical vocabularies, but because the game is quite practical, it made it a bit interesting, despite the fact that they had expression issues and probably did not understand some of the concepts. The practicability or the practical aspect of the game made it really very exciting. When it came to the mentors reported that Lego coding and programming, the curriculum, the Lego coding and programming curriculum had many new and technical vocabularies and concepts, which required translation into Kiswahili, the L1. So we argue that probably there is need to have a glossary of sorts, or if not a complete, translation of the curriculum into Kiswahili or any other African language. So some of the words like tilt sensor, medium motor, which we had seen earlier, the science rover, submarines, it was really difficult for the teachers to come up with, lexical equivalent in the target language, in this case, Kiswahili. Then mentors also indicated that learners' competence in Kiswahili was also not very advanced. And so sometimes they used quite lengthy explanation to, enhance understanding of some of these concepts and some of these skills that they wanted to really impart. So they also struggled to give age-appropriate explanations of these concepts in Kiswahili. There was also a general difference in the style of vocabulary talk promoted by each mentor due to lack of a common Kiswahili curriculum. If I may just point out one, a word like, motor. In Kiswahili, we would say maybe chombo ambacho kinaweza kuzungusha kingine. Another one would probably say kitu ambacho kinazungusha kingine. Those, for those who understand Kiswahili, know that we just speaking about the same thing, but using different vocabularies. So how, because of the book, we argue that there is need to have a curriculum in the local language or in local languages, so that learners are able to learn the same or same content. We go to our conclusions. Based on our findings, we conclude therefore that interventions such as code switching and code mixing remain useful strategies in enhancing learning, especially where L2 is largely incomprehensible for the learner. Just like in this case where L2 was largely, which was English, was largely incomprehensible to the learner. Furthermore, the exclusive use of L2 would jeopardize the communication. So one of the habits of mind that is enshrined in the WIDU 2.0 curriculum. So we may not want to use L2, in alone. So there is need to have code switching and code mixing. We also concluded that while Lego is an enjoyable game, the barriers that we have discussed in the findings remain a potential hindrance for many who would be young users, which in turn may affect the level of uptake for the average Kenyan child in the lower grades of primary school amidst the struggle by African children to penetrate the highly interactive global space. It is time that we provide opportunities for African children. But as we try to do that, language here seems to be quite a barrier. Now, this study therefore agrees with PUN 2018 that the Lego Corporation needs to make efforts to appeal to middle-income markets by tapping into its potential by dealing with the disadvantages such as language. So the PUN actually recommended that Lego needs to by, come up with curriculums in other languages so that they can appeal to markets such as Africa. So our recommendations are that policymakers could pursue a partnership with gaming corporations, such as Lego and any other gaming corporation, with a view to making the game available in Kiswahili and other local languages in order to enhance the functionality of local languages. We all know that local languages, indigenous languages in Africa have been relegated to, a situation where they're not really very important when it comes to matters of education. But we are saying that if they can be given more functionality by providing, curriculums in the indigenous languages of Africa. Furthermore, these games are providing, opportunities to enable children to discover their talent and potential. Now, when it comes to innovation, we are saying that we're arguing that similar games in African languages for African children should be innovated in an effort to provide equal opportunities with children from the global north, because this is an effort towards multilingual inclusivity and promoting literacy, and not only in Kenya, but also in Africa. So from a multilingual perspective, this is also meant to increase the cognitive presence of learners. So we believe that, we argue that the above recommendations are not only vital for Kenya, but also for Africa. If we are Millennium Development Goals and also complete globally, and also probably be able to participate in a meaningful way in the 4IR and also achieve the 21st century skills. Africa missed out on the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. So this fourth industrial revolution should not be a miss for Africa. So these are some of the strategies that we can use to ensure that children in Africa are actually have an equal platform to compete globally. So I think I want to end there, Dr. Cliff, just to invite you back so that you can end the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I actually think if there's time, I can wind up at the later on, but for now, I think we can hand over to Christine and take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cliff and Irene. The presentation was very clear and didactic, so we could follow all steps from your presentation. And there are many people from Brazil interacting on the chat. There is someone from Africa, Professor Vicky. She says, hi, Irene, enjoying the presentation. And some people from Brazil, they're saying good afternoon, enjoying the presentation. There is one specific question that is related to the difference between code switching and translanguaging, if you have considered both concepts in your research, code switching and translanguaging, because you have mentioned that. So there is one question related to this conceptual issue.
I would like Irene to answer that one first before I make a follow-up.
Sorry, the question is about the difference between code switching and translanguaging. Right?
Yeah, because we've mentioned both. I mean, yeah, you can.
Sure. So code switching here refers to, the aspect of switching from one language to the other during instruction. So that in this case, we are talking about, transversing between Kiswahili and English from time to time, so that if the learners, if you find something that they do not understand, then you use the language that is likely to make sense to them, or likely to, create meaning for them. But when it comes to translanguaging, I would like Dr. Cliff to probably handle that part.
Okay, so basically translanguaging would be a situation where during the instructor learner interaction, the instructor is able to draw on any of the resources beyond just the system or the code, which is maybe Kiswahili and English, but actually be able to draw on other multimodal or semiotic signs that or gestures that the children are using. So so in other words, we are arguing that while we recognize languages, but we also want to recognize that translanguaging is able to go beyond. So it's a question of going beyond. And I think the situation of going beyond those languages could actually take us further than just the normal languages that are allowed within that classroom space.
Great, thanks. And Victor in Tabo, he's saying hello. Irene and Dr. Cliff have taught us well this evening. Thank you very much. And there is another question about the educational language policy in Kenya. For example, is there an official bilingual project for education in Kenya? Can you share something about the educational language policy there?
Okay, yes, we can. Let me share something. Let me share the slide that has that. Yeah, that's the education policy of Kenya. In our education policy, the language of instruction in the lower primary school, where this particular study targeted, when it comes to the rural areas, they're encouraged to use the mother tongue, while places that are, like the urban centers and peri-urban centers, generally use Kiswahili, which also doubles up as a national language, but it's the L1 of learners in urban areas. But English is taught right from pre-primary school. That is PP. We refer to it as pre-primary 1 and pre-primary 2. So English is taught in the curriculum to children up to grade 3. The learners who were, participated in this study, who are 6 to 9 years, would be in the grade 1 to 3. So they are covered in the curriculum as using Kiswahili as a language of instruction. But either way, we needed both English and Kiswahili to teach Lego. Thanks. I don't know whether that's satisfactory, Christine.
Yes, thanks, Irene. And what about the Kiswahili? What is the official status of Kiswahili in Kenya? Is there a national language, an official language? Can you say something about that, please?
Sure, Christine. Kiswahili is the national language of Kenya and is also a recognized official language in the Kenyan Constitution. So it doubles up as the national language and also an official language. But we have 2 official languages, that is English and Kiswahili. Yes.
Yes, and there is also a question to Cliff, if he could share his experience with bilingual education in South Africa.
Okay. All right. Basically, in South Africa, what has been happening is that the primary schools, that is the grade 1 to grade 7, the policy says that there should be additive multilingualism, in the sense that the language, the second language, should be introduced gradually while the learners are being taught in their L1. But what actually happens is that schools don't practice that. They don't implement it that way. Instead, they go straight for English, because there is a belief that English, of course, maybe the earlier you get it, maybe the more better at using it, and maybe the more opportunities you will get into it. So that would be the majority. But in this case, the studies that I cited were cases whereby some learners, there are some studies that are being done where there is a concerted effort by the school governing bodies to encourage the use of the first language, maybe isiZulu or isiXhosa, and then in those instances, you find that there are a few classes that try to do that kind of multilingualism, such as the case with those teachers who are using TransLanguaging. Those are the teachers that have now been trained or taught to try and change the situation of doing that. But still the issue of English is still quite dominant, but it doesn't actually yield the desired results. It doesn't mean that our education system is strong and that in fact, even when it comes to the assessments and comparison in terms of Southern Africa, we find that many of those schools many of those students are falling behind. And there is an argument, of course, that they are falling behind because of the English, and that if the shift was towards the mother tongue, things would be better. And I think that's where the current situation is that there's more demand to move towards the mother tongue or the L1 because we're looking for better solutions. English hasn't served as well. Let me say that. That's.
Thanks a lot. So African countries have taught us a lot about multilingual education, multilingual strategies. That's really rich and powerful. So could you share something more about the production of pedagogical materials in those languages, in local languages or in indigenous languages or other national languages?
Okay, so what I can say there is that I work within the university context, and I have also been involved in some of these translations of, say, if, for instance, right now you get that when students cannot learn economics or are not succeeding in science, and even at university, then they say, oh, maybe you should translate the question paper to one of the African languages, or maybe you should, if not the whole paper, maybe create some glossaries in the African language so that maybe the students can get that. So that's the production of material. But I'm also aware that studies have shown that that actually doesn't help the learners because, again, if we look at what Harris says about the language myth, he also says it's also the translation myth, because the moment you start creating these meanings that you go with, which are already decontextualized, and then you go and say this is what it means, or maybe if you start attempting then to use those, you'll find that again some learners, the very learners, might then argue that, but is that really? I mean, I think Irene mentioned a situation in Kenya where some Kiswahili speakers might think, no, this is how we say it in Kiswahili. So even the L1 speakers themselves would disagree that this is how to say this. I mean, yesterday I was at another workshop on orthography and lexicography of one of the African languages. And I was actually amused just at the differences that even with my own L1, we don't agree on some of the spellings and also on some of the ways. So can you imagine now that you're trying to create materials in those languages that it creates those levels? So the issue of translation becomes then the translation myth is that, and again the issue of translanguaging as well relies a lot again now on the expertise. And I think that's even in that study that was done in the Eastern Cape, I think it becomes one exceptional teacher who is able to translanguage better than other teachers that is being promoted, rather than say a material where everyone can go and refer to, but rather it becomes embodied. In other words, the embodied practices of a teacher in a classroom might actually mediate much better or scaffold much better than material that is developed to promote the language.
Sure.
And is it possible to teach oral tradition in schools? How to deal with the oral tradition, like, for example, languages that do not have a script? So how can you deal with these language practices in educational context?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I wish Adrian Pablo can answer this one, because there's an interesting relationship between orality and literacy. And I haven't read much into Harris about what he says about that. But I also have my own notion of how we can draw on the oral practices in terms of teaching L1 and L2. But again, what we will find that there is that we will not be empowering them into some standard or official discourse. I think we might just be creating them into some, giving them access into some different kind of discourses or literacies that probably are African and maybe even Southern, and also maybe indigenous, and maybe that's what we should look for. I think I'm probably, in other words, I'm just saying, for me, I think that's our future, our line of thought, that we should be looking at all those oral traditions and with the official writing practices, and how we can change some of even the literate practices within that space of early childhood education.
Thanks, Dr. Cliff and Irene. Our time is running out. So just to remind us that Dr. Cliff is speaking from South Africa, from UNISA, and Irene is speaking from Kenya. She's from Laikipia University. I think I didn't mention that in the beginning of your presentation. So before we finish, I'd like to remind everyone to visit the channel on YouTube and check the future talks of this conference. There are many interesting discussions on integrationism and language ideologies. And Professor Cliff and Irene, could you share some final words before we conclude this session?
Okay, thank you, Christine. Probably just to say that gaming is one of the avenues that we can use to, teach even traditional literacies. I've seen scholars who have done game research, and I think it's really important that we focus on games if we are to really engage our children, especially in the lower grades of school, effectively. And for me, this study is just a beginning of, the possibilities that can happen as far as games go. Whether we are speaking of African languages or modern language, not African languages, African games, or whether we are speaking of modern games like Lego and many other games, games is basically the way to go. Otherwise, I've had a really good moment on this platform. I'm glad I was here, and thanks for the opportunity to present. Thank you.
Okay, I would also like to say that what I'm also interested in here is the issue that the game itself, Lego, can be a language. You could have a Lego speak, in the sense that the signs and the grammar, or the medium now, which is, because now we're looking at the game as a medium for the message, but actually the medium is the actual message, is the actual language. So if we look at that, I'm just thinking, do we really need words and language to play all the time? Can't we play using the material and achieve certain goals and objectives, such as fun, such as social cohesion, such as scientific reasoning or critical reasoning? So I think for me, I think gaming is quite, it's exciting in that it's opening up, even enriching our vocabulary, and vocabulary, not just dictionary, but various ways of communicating that we look at. So in other words, my parting shot is, do we need a language to play? Maybe we can just play with that. But so what we need is to communicate so that we play, and not the language. Those are my parting words.
Great. Maybe we should have a comparative analysis of the meaning of games in Brazil for Brazilian children, the meaning of games in Kenya and South Africa. That would be really fascinating. And thanks a lot. We have learned a lot from you. And see you.
Thank you, Christine. Bye.
Thank you.